esteemed panelists and dear participants who are present there to hear out our first e-food dialogue, which we are launching today by the TIC Council. So it is my honor and privilege to welcome you all on this dialogue on resilient food safety and crisis management. So as we gather today to discuss on this subject, which is not only a very fundamental to the public health, but also very crucial for the national security and also the economic stability of the country. And as we embark this August month, which relates to our festive spirits of the independence in India, we embark on this conversation, and it is fitting to draw parallel with this remarkable journey of our independence. I would like to take a minute before we start to brief you and the other audience over here about the TIC Council, which is a global association representing over 110 international third-party testing, inspection, certification, and verification organizations around the world. The aim of TIC Council is to provide a unified voice to the tech industry and engage governments and key stakeholders to advocate for effective solutions that protect the public, support innovation, and facilitate trade. Together with our members, we work to promote best practices. We do policy advocacy, specifically in the areas of safety, quality, health, ethics, and sustainability. With this brief introduction about the TIC Council, I would just like to say that TIC Council as a whole has a global committee on the food, as well as in the India regional region, we have a separate food and health subcommittee which works on the various initiatives of the food. I would now like to request Mr. Neeraj Garg, who's the Regional Director for India, Singapore, Malaysia at Eurofins, and has around 3 decades of experience in the food and the testing areas, who is also our founder sponsor for the Food and Health Subcommittee in India, to say a few words and to open the series of e-food dialogue, which we want to put in for others to listen, and more of an interactive session to gather insights from the industry and the participants. Over to you.
Thanks, Seema. So first of all, to the panelists, thank you for making time. Truly appreciate it. And for all the people who are attending, hopefully you would get some value out of the hour that you spend with us. And I'll just kick it off by a statement or data fact which sort of blew my mind. This was a United Nations document I was reading, and it said that the world loses 25,000 people a day to hunger. Okay, and this is sort of the magnitude of the problem in some ways that all of us are confronted with. So welcome to today's session. It's an e-dialogue, and I'll talk about what we mean by an e-dialogue, to resilient food systems, independence from the food crisis. Organized by the TIC Council, and this is an initiative we are kicking off by the Food and Health Subcommittee. The goal really being to try and bring stakeholders from across the food value chain together. So these are manufacturers, growers, regulators, consumer groups, and enabling sectors. And I think of the TIC sector as an enabling sector. So different components of the stakeholder group will come together in each of these sessions. And the idea really is to start talking about how can we put together, address some of the challenges that the food sector is facing. And today is sort of the first one in a series of sessions that we hope to be able to do over the rest of the year. Some trivia as you think about this topic. Food supply chains are global. We all know that. An interesting thing around that is that if you take 2 countries selected at random, importing a food product, the probability that they import that product from the same country in the world is 75%. Now that's how globally integrated food supply chains have become. We know about the Ukraine war and its effect on the industry. 20% of the global cereal grain production happens out of Ukraine. 28% of wheat exported in the world is from between Ukraine and Russia. And obviously, the Ukraine war has created its own challenges. Supply chains are global, but unfortunately, the food supply chain is also an extremely inefficient supply chain. It is estimated that 30% of the food produced in the world is actually lost in that supply chain, just due to inefficiencies at various element stages of that supply chain. In 2020, in a world of roughly 7 billion people, in 2020, 811 people were estimated to be suffering from malnutrition or undernourishment. So that's over 12% of the global population. Climate change and natural disasters have become a major issue in food production. And unfortunately, it's the least developed countries which are often the worst impacted of this. Now, I looked at the data between 2008 and 18, which is the 10-year period. In the least developed countries, over $100 billion of production was lost due to natural disasters and climate change. So we are talking about a situation which is a global supply chain, not hugely efficient. A lot of people at the unfortunate receiving end of that inefficiency. And the sort of population most impacted tends to be in least developed countries. And I think that's where, for a country like ours, where we're not the least developed, we're not the most developed, we're sort of straggling in the middle. How do we create food supply chains or systems which are resilient? To me, all of this was interesting trivia, but the data is not trivial. So it does have important consequences for us. And I'm hoping that this group today will talk about this. So welcome once again to the dialogue on resilient food systems, independent from food crisis. I think Jyoti and the team here will add a lot of value to this conversation. Our goal today is really to discuss how can we as a group strengthen food supply chains and really support the India's march towards Viksit Bharat, this march to becoming a developed country. And our approach to all of this is really to engage in a dialogue. The reason why we're calling this a dialogue, it's not a webinar, it's not a seminar, is this is really a conversation. So the panelists in some ways are going to talk amongst themselves, and some of you are listening in. But at the end of the day, what we really want to do is to begin that process of the journey of conversation. We want to be able to sort of heighten the awareness around the seriousness of some of these topics. One today, for example. And while we know that we won't solve for world hunger today, it's not a problem we're going to solve in 1 hour. But at least can we all collectively begin the journey to start talking about what can we do in our own way to address these issues. So that's really the goal. And with that, now I'll hand it over to you, Seema, to take the process forward.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. This was a wonderful kickoff words identifying, the key issues and the magnitude of the challenges. And yes, deeply appreciated that it's time that we start talking, having the right dialogue, right conversations to support the food ecosystem. Thank you so much. Now I would like to hand over the discussion to Ms. Jyoti. Just a quick introduction of Ms. Jyoti Bhasin, who has been a core team member in starting the NSF Asia Pacific operation and played pivotal role in expanding the business in multiple geographies, including Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Japan, ASEAN, South Asia, Middle East, and various segments of food, water, and health sciences. So she's a thought leader with an eye for detail, and she will be our master of the ceremony and moderator for today's session. So I will, with these words, I'll hand it over to Jyoti to take it up and introduce our panelists and take the entire session. Thank you so much, Jyoti, for doing it for us.
Oh, thank you, Seema, and thank you, Neeraj. That was a brilliant start, and thank you for all the people who've joined us as participants, as well as to my 3 fellow panelists who will really be sharing their insights and will be taking this dialogue forward. Now, as Neeraj mentioned, this is a start, and what we thought we'll do for the start is we'll bring together 3 different sectors. We've got Rupali from the manufacturing side. We've got Tarang really bringing in the tech view, and we've got Bobby bringing in the regulatory view. And I'll maybe say a few words on introducing them shortly, but I also wanted to just add now. Neeraj presented you a lot of data points, what he calls as trivia, but very interesting data insights. Now, he's all about IQ and I'm all about EQ. So, hopefully, some statements from me over here, which I thought were very relevant in an Indian context because if we all, as we were growing up as children in our society, we would hear our parents say it's all about roti kapda or makan. So right, the food is at the center stage of everything that we think of, the very essence of survival. And Neeraj again spoke about some numbers where we spoke about the number of people who can lose their lives eating food, but no one really deserves. And this is again a statement from from the chair of the United Nations, that no one really deserves to die of eating food. You don't eat food to die, yet deaths happen. Imagine consuming something that you do for your survival and not really surviving that very episode. So dialogues such as these are about providing food to people, but also providing safe food to people. And my three panelists over here play a pivotal role in taking that forward in their own areas and sectors of work. I'd like to start by introducing Rupali. Now, Rupali is the leader of quality at, she heads the quality systems for the Indian subcontinent for Kerry Ingredients. She's been a dear friend. I have known her for so many years. She's a thought leader in the industry. She has worked in different sectors, including the quick service restaurants, back end in terms of manufacturing. And we thought, who better than her to bring us a complete holistic perspective of what does a manufacturer look at and how do manufacturers look at the entire segment to bring in resilience and their asks. Bobby, again, a well-known thought leader. He's a senior food safety specialist with Dubai municipality. I would say he's the transition leader who's transformed and or has been a part of the transformation journey of Dubai, bringing in more digital footprint to food safety, looking at how do you integrate risk-based assessments, and also how do you identify foodborne illnesses. Dubai is like at the center stage of where I would say the world meets. A lot of businesses come in and a lot of businesses go out. So managing all that in a small landmass, it requires very efficient systems to put the whole integrated plan together. So we'll hear from him. And then Tarang, of course, representing the industry from that we are from, for us, the vice president for TUE India and also the vice chair for the food and health subcommittee over here. He's got more than 2 decades of experience in the TIC industry, which is the testing, inspection and certification business or conformity assessment business. So we'll also hear from him into how does this sector really help. My first question really to all three of you, and maybe we'll start with you, Rupali, as an industry view. How do you really define a resilience system? Like, what would you look for? Your ask, your dream aspiration for a resilient system?
Yeah, thanks, Jyoti. Thanks, everyone. And once again, good afternoon, everyone. If you ask me, what do I consider as a resilient food system? So a resilient food system, according to me, is a system which is able to withstand and recover any kind of disruptions in a way that it bounces back, ensure adequate supplies, and on top of that, ensures business continuity. So this is something which we as an industry player define a resilient food system. Now let's try to together explore how we can achieve. And in fact, I am completely agree with Neeraj. We will not achieve quickly, but at least how we can move forward towards more resilient food systems? As per my understanding and knowledge, there are 3-4 major components which we can consider while developing more resilient food systems. Number one is definitely planning. I understand planning is a small word, but carries a lot of weightage. And efficient planning while involving relevant stakeholders, I believe, plays a very important role in developing resilient food systems. Since I am representing industry, maybe I can share a couple of good practices which I have observed so far in this planning segment. One is definitely leveraging the knowledge and expertise of local supplier base. Not only in carry, but in global brands, sometimes we struggle between global, regional, local kind of things. But at least for some of the products, for example, agri commodities, I can bet anything that it works very well if you work in close coordination with local farmer or the grower base. Otherwise, it will never help. So leveraging the knowledge and skill set of local supplier base is one good practice. Second thing which I have learned from past 3-4 years since I switched from QSR to manufacturing is to putting a lot more focus on leading indicators instead of lagging indicators. I have a very strong view here that the time has gone for keeping a track on customer complaints or GFSI audit scores. And now we should evolve more around more leading indicators like master sanitation scores or some kind of efforts and training hours around hygiene and sanitation. Similarly, raw material testing, raw material non-conformances instead of finished product. So leading indicators versus lagging indicators. And third thing, I am sure at least everyone from India will agree, keeping a close track on regulatory landscape is becoming very important in India. We all saw this ETO issue very recently. So these are a couple of things which I can share, like good practices in planning. Second step will definitely be measuring and monitoring our food safety resilience. I know the next valid question will be how you will measure a food safety resilience. We fully understand it's a very complex thing, and there is not like a ready to go checklist or take something. This score means you are very resilient. This score means you are not resilient. But yes, now at least a couple of good tools and resources are available, which will ensure that your action plan and strategies are in sync with some data-driven approach, as well as leveraging the local experience of your supplier base or things like that. There are multiple ways. I can talk about some of my previous employers, current employer, and we generally put a lot of focus on business continuity plans. And as per my experience so far, they help a lot. The only thing is you have to keep on upgrading your plans and try to merge a lot more realistic potential threats. Everyone will agree there is no silver bullet. We cannot predict. No one could have predicted that Corona will come and business will be stand still. But try to plug in more and more potential scenarios. Keep your system testing again and again, and give a lot more importance to business continuity plans, not only in paper, but also in spirit. If you have put up a plan that in case of flooding, stocks will come from, instead of A, will come from B, try that. It might incur some cost, some time, resources, but it's better to try instead of putting it on the paper. So measuring and monitoring is second thing. Third thing, which in fact I covered while speaking, is upgrading. Upgrading, keep on enhancing your I will say horizon will help. And couple of things to put in mind. One is definitely regulatory landscape. Second is climate change. Try to map what kind of climatic events you are seeing in a particular geographical location. For example, I can share a classic case where we shifted the entire tomato farming from one region to another region of India, while getting some market intelligence that this region will no more suitable for such kind of crops. So climatic factors and definitely some kind of pandemic, if one can predict. I'm sure we are no gods, but if we can plug in some things in our continuity plans or potential hazards or potential incidents, it will help in strengthening or at least taking a step forward in terms of more resilient food systems.
Thank you, Rupali. Very,
Absolutely.
very comprehensive, great coverage. And you mentioned a couple of time about the measuring the regulatory landscape. Now we've got a regulator here. We've got Bobby here representing Dubai. Certainly a very advanced system there. What are your takes on this? I mean, when you look at it from a regulator's perspective, what are your asks, Bobby?
Hi, Jyoti, and the rest. Great to join you folks on this discussion. Like when we think about resilience from a business, from a regulatory perspective, it can be slightly different from what a business would see as a business continuity measure. So I look at resilience like a ship in the sea where you could be just having calm waters, you could be having storms, you lose direction sometimes, you don't have a direction sometimes, and you can run out of fuel, so many things could happen. And if you look at the life of 2.1 billion people around the world, they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow because they are in conflict zone. I think what worries me most, or what worries the food industry most probably, is this vulnerability that the world is currently having. And you'll be shocked with these numbers. Like 92 countries are in conflict today with their boundary, issues and disputes, and around 45 countries are physically involved in war. And a bulk of the big countries that produce food are not on physical war, but they're on economical or political war with countries that are dependent on them. So there's a huge political, economical bargain that's going on every day. And getting food systems resilient is not just about producing enough, it's about keeping your raw material supply coming in. And when we look at that, that ecosystem that sustains the food industry, we have to really look far beyond the food circle. And earlier, Doug was mentioning about the war, right? I mean, Russia and Ukraine, immediately we had consequences. But also, we have to have the future foresight to think that it's just not the wheat and other food products that are going to go short. We are also going to go short of fertilizers, which is like a huge part of the supply comes from Ukraine and Russia. That would mean that eventually the food production is going to go down, and all the countries that are dependent on their fertilizers are also going to produce less. Plants are going to get weakened, soil is going to get weakened, and then you got a whole cycle that's really going to be catastrophic for the rest of the world, right? So that's one part of the story. So we're looking at conflicts and trying to see what is that ground where we can build resilience around, reducing conflicts, keeping the food moving. Because sitting in Dubai, we see the movement of food from non-conflict zones to conflict zones. And what we try and do is to keep that food supply as rigorous as possible, because what we don't want to happen is the shortage of supply in countries that are already in conflict, because food itself can become a center of a new problem, right? So that's one perspective. The second perspective is of climate change, right? And you look at climate interactions. Yes, there are direct impacts where food production is lost, but also transportation and logistics are also affected. When the Panama Canal went down, like with water supply, what happened is that the supply chain that was working through the canal got disrupted, and then ships have to move further down the entire American continent, and then come down to Africa and other places where food is short. And then you look at that getting exacerbated by what's going on with war. Like Panama Canal is already broken, and then you got the Suez Canal blocked, and then you got the Red Sea blocked, and look at the collateral damage that all these things have caused together. So I look at food safety as not just one element where we see these aspects of food production, but as a comprehensive or a larger problem that's surrounding humanity today. And I think we have to touch upon every aspect of life and figure out what's going on. So my risk assessment would include, like, where is that food produced today? But if it's not produced in a country where aflatoxin can be lower, and move to a new production area, and then aflatoxin incidence increase, right? I mean, so you want to anticipate all these problems when you're looking at food safety. And importantly, adding on to what you said earlier about roti, kabla, and makan, and I think my favorite would be roti, kabla, makan, and data. You want to look at those numbers. You want to look at those very, very carefully, whether you're in a stock market or in food. I mean, that data has to be really close to you. And I also use stock market as a good predictor for food safety, because you know where the turmoils are coming on. The financial guys pick it up much early, so they serve as our scanner. And that's how I kind of try to see the world today. And more than happy to share other thoughts that come along into it.
Excellent, Bobby. So the bull and the bear are our best friend. We need to remember that, right? Irrespective of where we are. Great thoughts. So thank you for sharing, keeping the food moving. TIC really plays a very important role, Tarang, right? To move things along the value chain. What's your take on how can we do more to help the resilience in the food system?
Thanks, Jyoti. I mean, I think if I define TIC, and the representation I make, I think we sit exactly here between Rupali and Bobby, between the regulator, between what's required to the industry and how they are kind of delivering that expectation. I kind of, when I try and imagine the TIC industry, and I do not know what is the profile of all the attendees on this group here. But when you draw out a traditional supply chain, it's always showing this from, you're talking about farm, then you show a little representation of a vehicle that would take it to a factory, you're talking about warehousing, you're talking about retail, you're doing this entire farm to fork concept. Sometimes it's a little misleading because it doesn't show our testing, inspection, certification industry somewhere there. I think we're the little invisible arm in this whole process that needs to be done. You talk farm to fork, I think we're the ones who kind of ensure or verify whether the farm is safe and the fork is clean, at the end of the day. So what resilient food systems, I think, for me, if I were to look at this, I would talk about, among all the things that both Rupali and Bobby spoke about, but I'd say first of all, reliability. Take the challenges of India today. It's not as if India does not produce high quality goods. The problem is not about quality. The problem is always also about consistency. Can I produce high quality goods every single time with a zero miss? And, so the point that Rupali was talking about when she's talking about leading indicators, I think that's where the TIC really has to play a role, but also transform itself while they do it. We're also talking, when we talk resilient, we're talking about systems that are robust in itself, that will withstand these kind of ripples in the calm water that Bobby was talking about. About somewhere, a disruption of supply chain, a delay in movement of goods. How is the system therefore then robust enough to be able to cater to it? Do we have sufficient preventive controls in place that can take care of these small ripples? Tidal waves like the COVID are a different ballgame altogether. It really had all of us scratching our heads for a long time when we initially started to grapple with it. I think the third part to a resilient system, I would say, would be in terms of the responsiveness to a crisis. Today, we are all in a situation where we are required to respond. Some of these crises cannot be predicted. Some of them are completely out of our hands. But the ability and the agility to kind of move things quickly in case of an adversity, to be able to kind of recover from that same situation. Let's just take a point of case here, right? So, some of these countries that are at war today, there are also countries that are producing some of the food. There are neighboring countries that are providing foods on a global scale. Many of these countries are also nuclear powers. As an example, I'm just taking one example, and the risks that can really arise from all of these. And today we are all part of the same global supply chain. I think if I were to talk about again the TIC role in this whole system, I would say we should be looking at being in a position where we can help the industry as well as the regulator take decisions. Our role really is about that, whether it's in terms of measurements, whether it's in terms of leading indicators, whether it's in terms of big data analysis. So Rupali mentioned several terms. He's talking about, when you talk about hygiene and cleanliness as a primary indicator, right? Today, and I believe that what she meant was we're really not talking about just the conventional environmental swabs to indicate whether something is clean, not clean. She's been doing that for years, and so does most of the industry. How do we take this data? How do we convert this data into something that's more than just data? That's intelligence, saying that, which identifies the risks, which identifies more hotspots, which identifies saying this could be my areas of concern during this season in this particular region, for example, and it could be completely dynamic and completely something very, very different in some other place. Her challenges, for example, in her factory in the north could be very different from her challenges in the factory in the south today. And those challenges could be something completely different in any other part of the world. I think it's bringing together all of this data. There is no standard SOP. There are standard SOPs, but I'm saying part of the standardization is the fact that we need to be dynamic, the fact that we need to be agile. And I think TIC's role there is to see how we transform ourselves to help them with what they are seeking.
Transformation, agility are some of the keywords which are emerging, right? And it's important that we as a sector also make sure we understand what the need of the businesses are, the need of the regulator are, and how do we continue to play our role as connecting the dots scenario. All right, that's great. Thank you, Tarang. I want to come back to you, Bobby, on the fact that you mentioned about the bull and the bear being your best friend. Now that gives a new perspective to how we really look at the trends and how do we look at bringing in resilience. What do you think are like other emerging trends that businesses could look at to define or which could support building a resilient system? So your top 3 picks on emerging trends that could help shape the future of resilience.
I think, Jyoti, every business, every country has to start really looking at the entire supply chain from the production side all the way to your plate. More importantly, we need to understand all the factors that would impact the production in the country of origin. So, supply chains are sometimes very deceiving. Like, for instance, south of India, where I'm from, we produce a lot of cashews, but there was a time when all the cashews were produced here, but not anymore. So if the supply from the other parts of the world, from Costa Rica or Africa, produces, then we don't have cashews to manufacture or produce, right? So if you look at only the production supply chain and say that, hey, India does not have a problem, so the cashew market is going to be great. That's not what it is today, right? So we have to really understand the supply chain. And I always urge food businesses to look as as close as possible the entire supply chain and look at all the variables and for that, there are tools available today. You can use technology tools. And the second thing would be, we need to understand what people want, what consumers want, what are their expectations, how are they changing? I mean, are we going to go into farms that are vertical? Are we going to choose cell-based meat or the normal meat products? Are we going to see people eating less meat in the future? Are we all going vegan? Are we going gluten-free? So there's so many trends that are emerging, and we have to have that ability either to drive a certain behavior or to understand a certain behavior and put a new output, right? So consumers, are they getting more healthier? I mean, that's an objective that the government has for sure. So can we drive them to be more healthier? And a silver bullet here would be to add diversity into the diet. I mean, because that kind of strengthens your resilience and the measures that you take. Because if you are just eating two foods, like the likelihood that your disruption would affect you is far more higher than a community that eats very diverse range of foods, mostly vegetable and plant products, right? So we have to really look at resilience from a consumer point of view. The third thing, and then my favorite thing, is the technology point of view. Like, look at emerging technology, and we use some of these words very liberally, like AI and robotics and stuff like that. I think that the time now is to look at what in AI are we talking about. Are you looking at generative AI? Is it going to make me see the products better and the supply chain better and my production better? Is it going to help me with changing the recipes? Is it going to help me with understanding consumer behavior? Is it going to change the industry behavior? Can I train my staff better? Can I predict my microbiome, or can I identify illnesses faster and be specific with the risk? I mean, what we always say, salmonella has increased, or Shigella has increased, but we are not really looking at the high resolution image yet. Like, what type of salmonella is it? Where is it coming from? What sources is normally associated with, and so on. So we have to use technology a lot more than we are using today to identify specific risks and also identify measures to mitigate them, like better water system, better irrigation systems, better production mechanisms, better use of additives, and any other intervention. So I think we also have the information today to understand at what level do we need additives, what preservatives are required in certain cases. Can we reduce them significantly? And what is the cost that we are actually incurring? Because you might save some shelf life on a product, but lose out on the health of people, and then spend eventually more, right? So I think that's where I would say technology has to really come in, and we have to start using that. And above all, I think what I would really look at is a good public-private partnership between government, industry, as strengthened as much as possible. We need global collaborations. I'm really happy to be in this meeting, mainly because this is a place where I get to learn from others. So all of us, who are in this meeting, the panelists and the listeners, I think we need to start. We need to share information. We need to exchange our best practices and negotiate risk much more effectively, because it is not about risk management alone. It's about the negotiation. What am I willing to give up? What am I willing to take? And those negotiations have to be strengthened with science and better data. And that's what I would say are my key takeaways, moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Bobby. Bobby, you mentioned about really emerging technologies like AI, and that changing from really being a buzzword to technology which is really delivering any goods and fruits for us. Rupali, your take on that? I mean, from the industry's perspective, are emerging technologies being used, or it's more of a buzzword right now? And then after that, Tarang, I'd like you to talk about how does the tech industry gear up when these come in?
Yeah. So thanks, Jyoti. Interesting question. And honestly, at least in past 8 months, wherever we go, this question comes, ki how we can leverage technology. And I will be very honest, maybe a little bit conservative also, but we have to pick our choices very wisely. Sometimes it happens, you get into the vicious cycle of like, I will not use the word glamour, but if everyone is using blockchain, why shouldn't I? But you have to understand it's a common sense. First learn to walk, then only you can jump. So this is in a way careful selection. But yes, 2-3 things which are very popular as well as very useful in terms of food processing manufacturing industry. One is definitely AI. AI is everywhere now. If you pick any stage of the processing, whether it is at farmer level, processing level, at retailer, at warehouse. So AI actually helps the relevant people to analyze the information from multiple sources and make very informed decisions. So AI is definitely one thing which we are doing multiple projects, and some projects interestingly is also aimed towards how we can leverage AI by having some imagery and some data points and improving people's behavior towards food safety and improving overall food safety culture. So AI is one thing. Second thing, which is very focused right now, is hardcore production, that is machine learning and computer controlled machines. I am sure you might have seen a couple of new plants, maybe of Indian companies, global companies. They are using robotics, and especially for people where color is very important, either a French fry or a tomato paste or regular sorting of pulses, legumes. So robotics and some kind of advanced imagery solutions are helping. So AI is one thing. Second thing is machine learning. And third thing, I will say any kind of solutions which can ensure forward and backward traceability. Blockchain technology is still, I will say, new, and we do lack the kind of expertise and skill set it requires to ensure efficient utilization of blockchain. But couple of things like track and trace, RFID tags, GPS tracking is now very common, popular, and in fact, they are the best bet to ensure forward as well as backward traceability. It also helps in getting assurances from your customers or end consumers. So just to summarize, AI, machine learning, and traceability solutions, track and trace systems.
Perfect. And you said a very important word there. Does not need to, we have to be careful. I mean, it needs to not just be a buzzword, but it needs to be something that we're actually using. Tarang, your take. How is it that the tech industry can support in this? I mean, are we ready? Can we evaluate these things?
The honest word, I think we are learning as the machine is. I share some of the reservations that Rupali talks about. There are more buzzwords than real solutions today. I think everyone's in the learning process, and so is the tech industry. If you look at us traditionally as an industry, we are, we've always been very objective, checklist driven, SOP driven, whether it's auditors, inspectors, scientists and analysts working within a laboratory. We're looking at clear data points. Today, the need is not data. Today, the need is information to take decisions, which means how do I take multiple data points? And that's where you require to use tools. We're learning those digital. That's a bit of the digital transformation that's happening within the industry. But how do you take these multiple data points? It could be come out of a non-conformance from an audit to the to a test result, to a hygiene monitoring data point, to maybe a possible failure in an inspection report. Put all of this together, look at the entire thing holistically, to look at these kind of digital innovations that can help bring this out into information that will be actionable. today a single audit report or a single test report is not actionable by itself. What Rupali would be doing at her end, or what Bobby and his team would be doing at their end, is also collating multiple data. So we're all looking at tools here, Jyoti, to try and see how we can convert data to information, and that's really what's happening. If you look at the typical laboratory space, multiple equipments, I can use the cliche of state of the art or emerging technology, but really, at the end of the day, this integration of equipment, integration of data. I mean, can I look at the same thing from different prisms? Today, if you take classically, one of the big problems that economic as well as in terms of brand loss could be in terms of food fraud or inauthenticity. Some of it could be intentional, some of it could be non-intentional. Sometimes you don't even know what you're looking for. Is what I'm buying today as good as and same as what I was buying yesterday? Is something that I need to be assured of. And when you put it as generic as you do, then you're going beyond the realms of targeted analysis. For example, you're really looking for something that you don't know what could be there. So one big trend that's also happening on the testing space, I suppose, and this will continue, where we're looking how do we get into areas of non-targeted analysis, not of your typical quantification of data points. And I think that's where the future is going to head into. As we start to source globally, you set up a plant anywhere in the world, you would be sourcing from various other regions. Sometimes you enter into countries where you're not aware of all the risks and challenges that may lie, which means you have to be looking for everything, and you have to be looking for the unknown. So to answer your question honestly, Jyoti, are we ready to support the industry or the regulator there? Maybe not. Have we already started to think about it and work in that direction? I think possibly yes.
Tarang, I loved your statement on multiple prism leading to the same spotlight. I think that's important, right? I mean, no matter how you analyze, you end up at the same place. And that's really what the industry would need to reassure itself. That's what a regulator would need to reassure itself. And I know that we can all go on for, nth number of time to discuss this, but I realize that we have an hour and we are in the last 12 minutes. I will actually come back to the three of you for one last byline. But before we do that, I think let's break for questions and look at if we have questions. We do have a technical question in the chat, and I don't know if that's meant for you, Rupali. If you could help on hydroponics. I mean, this is more on the agri side on, do we see hydroponics adding value, and in supply chain, do we see any advantages in it? In any of your lives, have you used it, or have you seen it, Bobby? In a water-starved country, have you seen hydroponics happen? Anyone?
Okay.
And your
we're heavily on it, Jyoti. I'll probably answer that briefly. We are heavily into vertical farms, and hydroponics is one component of it. And what we've seen is, yes, there has been an increased capital investment in that space, but also worrying is the number of people who back out after a certain period of time, because it somehow doesn't give the profits that businesses are planning. So we've seen large collapses across the world in terms of large vertical farms. And another area that we are looking at is diversifying the crops that can be grown under specific conditions or controlled conditions. And again, hydroponics is a subset of it. We're also looking at all the other products, including fish and related products also. So the number of crops that can be grown are still very less. And take for example, we can produce lettuce a lot. A lot of these varieties are good, but that is not really feeding on to the entire global community or demand, right? So it's not something that we would prefer more palak than lettuce, right?
Yeah,
palak
so
is
limited
a long
use.
way. So absolutely. So we need to really look at that, and that's where I was mentioning earlier about diversification of the palette. I think we need to start experimenting with other foods, get the new generation, try other salads other than what we are normally used to.
Fusion Indian.
And also, like, look at cucumber, for instance, and there are only a couple of varieties that can be grown in vertical farms, but we eat a lot of other varieties here which are not really suitable for that. So I think that's one. Technology investments are still dependent on the globe, so we need to not only invest in the infrastructure, we need to invest on fertigation, we need to invest on the equipment maintenance and so on. So it is a high investment area. And I think a long way to go there in terms of really substituting what is, but it's a useful solution for certain areas only where energy conservation can be made.
Sounds good. Rupali, you were about to, I mean, I know in one of your previous lives, you must have definitely used it, right? I think we have a screen freeze for her. Anyone else? Any question? Yeah, Rupali, you're just back. So anything you want to add? No, screen freeze continues. And Bobby, you were talking about bad signal at your end. So anyone else? Any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists while in the city of Delhi, Rupali sorts out her internet connection? No questions? Yeah? All right, I think we're coming close to the hour. It's always good to give people 5 minutes back, but Tarang, your closing line, what would be your closing one line? If one favorite takeaway that you'd like the audience to go back with from today, like what should they think about? One big item.
I think I think the fact that we are discussing resilient foods, nobody seems to have the one answer right now, but everybody's talking about it. And the fact that we have many answers and many of those are being tried, I think I would like the audience to go back with that thought, that it's, it's more than just a silver lining. There is actual thought and work being put into play out here. By regulators, by industry, by the supply chain, and by the verifiers like us who belong to this outside the box system of TIC. We're all trying, and we're trying to make this world a safer place as we go. Safer and safe, secure, I think sustainable without a doubt today. Work in progress is the big board for me, Jyoti.
Excellent, thank you. Bobby, any last lines from you?
Yeah, Jyoti, last night I got a message from Dubai, like one of the team members in the industry members asking me, we're getting a supply from a catering company, and the catering company is refusing to declare the allergens in their foods that are getting supplied. So there was a whole controversy between the catering company and the restaurant or the hotel that was particularly taking the food for their staff members. So while they were coding the food code, I asked the food safety manager in the hotel, okay, you're getting this product for your staff. Is there any staff member who's allergic to any of these products? And then the person mentioned that I don't know. So here's the thing that we're trying to solve. And every country, every region, every company tend to make this mistake. And very often we do not know what we're trying to solve. And understanding your risk and understanding your limitations, understanding your capabilities is what is the most important tool taking forward. And I think that's where we need to spend time on. And along with that, we have to improve our capacities and capabilities, especially in the digital age. We need to enhance our digital capability. We have to be competent in analyzing data. And it's just not these departments of IT or departments of data that have to learn all these things. Every person has to understand data in a way that they can use it. And every system that works has to make sure that people down the line who are taking decisions, and when I'm looking at a regulator, every inspector who's in the field should have the capacity to understand it and also be empowered to use the data with sufficient technology backup so that they can take better decisions. And don't forget, we also have data divide. Like there's still people who cannot follow any of these technology tools, and that divide has to also be foreseen. So I think taking into account all these things, and then we can probably solve a lot more problems than we are doing today.
Absolutely. I love what you've said, and I, most of us must have heard this statement, but I'll say it nonetheless. Don't boil the ocean. I think sometimes we get down to the task of boiling the ocean. We should not be doing that. Second, don't let excellence be the enemy of good. So if we remember these two, it will really help us. Rupali, now that if we have you back on, your last line before we call it a seminar.
So not exactly last line, but last words. Just one request, if we can maintain continuity and momentum, that would be great help for entire industry, because such dialogues can help only if we can maintain continuity and give maybe some key takeaways, and people look forward for what coming next in whatever way. If we can collaborate and help each other, that would be really good.
Absolutely. So we will definitely do that. This means you've already signed up for our next webinar, which will come up. We take that as a yes.
Okay.
Continuity, it will be. I think, Bobby, Harshad would really need some help. So thank you for answering his question on hydroponics. But with that, we come to the end of today's webinar. We hope it's added value to all of you as it is done to us. I really want to thank all my esteemed panelists for taking out the time. Here's a virtual plaque coming your way for all your time given to given to us. I'm sure Seema will send across some certificates of acknowledgement, but certainly, Rupali, this is not the last of it. It's only a beginning at our end. Great learning, some great insights, whether it is the multi-prism aspect or the diversification. I love the take on leading indicators that you brought forward, and how you could look at, Bobby, different areas, to spot the early trends. And then, of course, actionable insights. It's important that we do something with what we know than just keep sitting on it. So take everyone along, and we continue to develop more resilient food system in a developed India of 2047. With this, we are signing off. Thank you for joining us today. Till we see you.
Thank you.
Have a great time
Have a
ahead.
nice day,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you,
Thanks. Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.